Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to discuss the answer planning for a topic, Prion Hypothesis. It's a topic in paper 1 of Botany under microbiology section in Civil Service Main Examination syllabus, and in Indian Forest Service Main Examination syllabus, you will find this topic under genetics in paper 2. The topic Prion can give you multiple different types of question. This is one of the question, and here we are going to discuss the answer planning and then gathering the needed facts and concepts to write a good and wholesome answer. So let's take a look here. First and foremost, there are a few important things that you should be paying attention to, which we need to keep in mind before we go ahead with the discussion. If I go full screen, so first thing that you need to understand that where do you find this topic in the syllabus. So as I told you, that in paper 1 of Civil Service Main under microbiology, you will be finding this topic prions, and in IFS you will be finding this topic under genetics in paper 2. Second thing is, we are going to discuss in this video Prion hypothesis, and this is one of the several questions that may be asked to you. There are certain other questions which are also possible. Before jumping into Prion hypothesis, let's see what are the other questions that could be asked to you. So the other question that you can see, the first question is, what are prions? Discuss their nature, structure and mechanism of action. Second question is, discuss the unique structural and pathogenicity related aspects of prion. A question on these wordings exactly has not been asked, but very similar scope question has already been asked in the civil service examination. The third question is, how can a pathogen without genetic material multiply itself? Explain with example. A question with this scope has already been asked in the Indian Forest Service Main Examination. So these are the other questions than Prion hypothesis question that might be asked to you. Now let's come to the main question which we are going to discuss today. Write a brief note on Prion hypothesis and what is the significance. That means, what is the significance of Prion hypothesis? Let us see what are the main facets of this answer. The question is asking, what is Prion hypothesis? Write a brief note upon it. And second part of the question is asking you to comment upon the significance. If you divide the weightage of this question, then the first part is going to occupy or take almost 75% of the weightage, and the significance of Prion hypothesis is going to occupy not more than 25% of weightage. So all the topics, let's reframe it, like all the questions which are into 2 parts or 3 parts, it does not necessarily mean that you have to divide every part equally. In terms of subject, in terms of knowledge, there are certain topics, certain parts of the question which will occupy a bigger weightage, and then there are going to be certain other parts which are going to occupy lesser weightage. That is the case here. So let's start. What are the facets that we should be discussing? First, you should be starting with what are prions and all. Second, come to the history of Prion hypothesis. Third, the main points of Prion hypothesis. Fourth, what are the evidences in support of Prion hypothesis? Fifth, importance or significance of Prion hypothesis. And sixth point will be a brief conclusion of Prion hypothesis. That is how in 6 small parts you are going to complete your answer. And the 3 biggest parts will be the history, the main points and evidences in support of the Prion hypothesis. And before going ahead, you will also need to discuss what are prions. So now let us take a look on how I have organized the answer, and I will also be explaining you why I have taken certain facts which you would otherwise not find in most of the common textbooks, but why they are important facts. So let's start with the very first facets, and I hope you can clearly see this. So the first point is that in medical pathology, prions are misfolded proteins found in mammalian central nervous system, which cause transmissible neurodegenerative conditions. And then what I have done, that I have given all the known diseases which are transmissible neurodegenerative conditions which are caused by prions. So I have brought all the conditions. Like in humans, there are 3 diseases which are known. One is Kuru. That was the oldest prion disease that was discovered. It was discovered in 1937-38. Then there are 2 more diseases which we know. One is Gerstmann-Straussler syndrome, and one is CJD Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. These are all human diseases. And among the cattle, there are 2 diseases known. One is scrapie, that's a disease of sheep. This was the first prion disease known to the scientists. So along with Kuru, scrapie was the earliest prion disease that got to be known. And then bovine spongiform encephalopathy. The other name of bovine spongiform encephalopathy is mad cow disease. Once you have given this much of information about prions, that means you have now set the stage for discussing the prion hypothesis. So you have told the examiner what are prions, what is the disease which is caused by the prions, and then what are the examples of this generic category of diseases. Now let's get into the main demand of the question. So the main demand of the question is about prion hypothesis. Prion hypothesis has a little bit of history, and because this history is something that leads to the main proposals of the prion hypothesis, therefore mentioning history is important. Let me make it very clear to you that in all the cases, history is not an important thing to be mentioned, but in case of prion hypothesis, history is important to be mentioned. So the history of the prion hypothesis starts with 1937, when the earliest prion diseases, among the earliest prion diseases was discovered, and it was scrapie disease in sheep and Kuru in humans. After that, the researchers earlier assumed that these diseases are being caused by some slow virus type infectious agent, but the evidences did not agree with these hypotheses. What was the major evidence that came? That was given by Alper and his co-workers in 1966. Alper and co-workers reported that the treatments which normally destroy the nucleic acid, they have no effect on eliminating prion diseases. So if prion diseases are being caused by some virus, then viruses will have genetic material, either it will be RNA or it will be DNA. So if you treat this supposed virus, of course it was not a virus, but if you treat this supposed virus with such radiation, such chemicals which destroy the nucleic acid, ideally speaking, the virus should no longer be active and the disease should be eliminated, but that did not happen. That was the first finding of Alper. The second finding of Alper and his co-worker was that the effective molecular mass which was sufficient to cause the disease was so less that it was almost impossible that a virus would be operating at such low molecular mass level. These were 2 very key evidences. Therefore, you mention the scientist at the same time you mention these 2 points. It is rather unfortunate that in most of the Indian textbooks, these evidences, this line of evidence is not given, and that somehow does not prepare you for writing a good answer on prion hypothesis. And I will later tell you how most of the students, they simply prepare a general account of prion, and even when the question is specifically asking on the hypothesis, they end up explaining the prion and they come back. So apparently this is not the right way to answer a question on Prion hypothesis. The structure that we are discussing is something that will do justice to Prion hypothesis. Anyways, coming back to the Prion hypothesis history. So what we have seen that it was initially presumed by the scientists that some kind of slow virus is causing the infection, but Alper and his co-workers gave these two evidences. After these two evidences, it became clear that it might not be a virus. In other words, it might not be an agent with a nucleic acid. And that is around the time that speculations started that prion diseases are being caused by perhaps protein-based agents. In 1967, Griffith proposed 3 scenarios, and here you don't need to get into the 3 scenario details of Griffith, but Griffith proposed the 3 scenarios by which a protein can be an infectious agent. And the breakthrough came from the work of Stanley Prusiner and his co-workers. In 1982, they isolated the prion protein, they gave Prion hypothesis, and they coined the term prion. In 1997, Stanley Prusiner got Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for having discovered the correct agent for these neurodegenerative conditions, and at the same time giving a coherent model on how these agents they cause the disease. That model given by Stanley Prusiner is known as Prion hypothesis. Now we are ready to bring in the important points of Prion hypothesis in our answer. So the next part is the main points of Prion hypothesis. The main points of Prion hypothesis can be brought under 3 major points. The first point is misfolded prion proteins and not virus or bacteria. Okay, not virus or bacteria, it is misfolded prion protein which is responsible for causing the so-called prion disease, and these prion diseases are nothing but spongiform transmissible encephalopathies. So it is actually a misfolded protein. The next part that Prusiner and his team discovered and brought in the Prion hypothesis is your second point of Prion hypothesis answer, that is prion proteins exist in 2 forms. One form is PRPC, that is prion protein cellular. This is normally present in our bodies and this protein is expressed in our central nervous system, but this is not going to cause any disease. This is the normal version of the prion protein. But it is the second version of the protein, that is PRPSC, SC standing for Scrapie, which is misfolded, which is protease resistant, and which has a tendency to convert prion protein C into prion protein SC. And thus it causes disease, because when this PRPSC is in the body, it will slowly convert all the PRPC into PRPSC, and that way it will start accumulating and it will cause neurodegeneration. That is the second point. This is the crux of the working of prions. The third point that they say, that prion protein SC can be present, can arise in your body either by a spontaneous or induced mutation in the gene that encodes prion protein. Second, if someone has inherited this gene from one of the parents. And third, if you have ingested the misfolded prion protein, that is PRPSC, by consuming meat of an infected animal. So in any one of these 3 ways, if prion protein is in your body, it will start converting the normal prion protein into SC version of prion protein, and it will slowly accumulate because the PRPSC is resistant to proteases and it tends to accumulate, and after accumulation it causes neurodegeneration. So these are the three major points of Prion hypothesis. So that you have mentioned. After that, what are the evidences in support of this hypothesis? Two of the evidences you have already mentioned. So you simply now enlist it. Alper's observations in 1966. What are Alper's observations? You have seen. One, its operating molecular mass is so less that it does not correspond to a virus. Second, even if this agent is treated with such treatment, such radiation or chemicals which destroys the nucleic acid, it does not lose its infectivity. These were Alper's observations. Apart from that, Stanley Prusiner in 1982 properly isolated the prion protein. So that's the second and most direct evidence. And third, in the recent years, there have been extensive proteomic studies on prion proteins, and we exactly know the reason why the prion proteins get misfolded and why the misfolding causes prion proteins become resistant to proteases. So that is the third line of evidence, and in 2010 the scientists were able to synthesize prion protein SC in the lab, and when this prion protein SC was injected into farm animals, they developed the prion diseases. So all of these are strong evidences in favor of prion hypothesis. What is the importance of prion hypothesis? So Prion hypothesis, first and foremost, it is important from the academic point of view that it gave for the first time an idea of a transmissible disease which was possible without a traditional pathogen, that's bacteria, virus. So none of these were involved in any of the prion disease, and it became a new paradigm in transmissibility, that even a protein by using this mechanism can transmit from one animal to another. So that was a paradigm shift. That's the first point. Second point is, whenever a disease is understood correctly, it leads to the right medical interventions. So the correct characterization of the prion diseases, it led to the proper preventive methods towards the prions. And that was an important breakthrough in terms of prion diseases. But let's understand that until now we do not have any treatment for prion disease. Prevention is still possible. We are concluding with one such thing which we have not used elsewhere in the answer, that in the recent years the scientists have been working on knocking out the prion gene so that altogether we eliminate the chance of developing PRP-SC. So in farm animals, the scientists have actually been able to do it, but whether they can adopt the same method on human beings, that remains to be seen, and any human genetic manipulation will have its serious ethical and legal dimensions, and without addressing them, any human genetic modification will be completely out of question. But in farm animals, the scientists have been exploring the ways to have knockout mutants so that we completely remove the function of prion genes. So well, this is the content for prion hypothesis answer. What are the 2-3 things that you should be keeping in mind? First and foremost, the answer should be correctly addressing the question, because the question was on prion hypothesis. So the focus of this answer was on prion hypothesis. So I introduced prion hypothesis, and before that I gave a short introduction to what are prions. Within prion hypothesis, I spoke about its history, I spoke about the main propositions of prion hypothesis, and then I gave the evidences in support of prion hypothesis. That way what happens, that the focus of the answer is on hypothesis part, not on prions as such. So a lot of students, as I was telling you earlier, they mistakenly take it as yet another question on prion, and they write all about prions, what are prions, how do they infect. So that would not be the right approach to answer this question. Then in significance part, we mentioned the medical significance as well as the academic significance. And if you have noticed, I have been a little careful about the name of the scientist and the year of discovery. So I mentioned in 1937, the first prion disease was noticed by the scientist Scrapie in sheep and Kuru in humans. Similarly, in 1966, Alper and his co-workers gave good, strong evidences to support that it might not be a virus. Then 1967, when Griffith proposed that it does not look like a virus and there are 3 scenarios in which the proteins can also be infectious. And then 1982, when Stanley Prusiner and his co-workers, they finally isolated and gave a proper hypothesis to explain the prion diseases. And I also mentioned the year when Prusiner got Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, that was 1997. I'm trying to say that without forcing yourself, try to be very accurate about the name of the scientist, and if possible, remember the year or at least the decade in which it was happening. This will add that extra accuracy, the extra specificity to your answer, and it is always appreciated by the UPSC examiner. So I think this discussion gave you some insight into how to focus our answer exactly to the demands of the question, and then how to organize the facts under proper headings and subheadings so that our answer is not only complete but coherent and easy to navigate by the examiner. So I hope you found this video helpful, and I'll be coming up with many such videos in future also to keep your answer writing on the right track. Till we meet again, goodbye and good luck to all of you.